Hello and welcome to a new episode of SPC Conversations. My name is Greg Gross, and I serve as Vice President and on the Board of Directors of Solidarity with the Persecuted Church. SPC's mission is to help the Christian church persevere in areas of the world where it faces religious persecution, working with local church leaders to promote sustainability and resist persecution. We also work to increase awareness here in the United States and around the world of the plight of Christians in these areas. Here with me today is SPC's president, also its heart and soul, and my good friend Steve Wagner. Hi, Steve.
Greg, great to be with you. It was over 10 years ago that you and I started Solidarity with the Persecuted Church with two of our friends, Father Roger Hunter Hall and Diego von Stauffenberg. And today is our Paul Revere moment, where we have come back from Nigeria with very disturbing news.
Yes, and unfortunately over those 10 years, in some ways, the situation has become worse, certainly in certain parts of the world. Steve, you've done so much in government and in the private nonprofit world in so many good directions, always helping others through policy and action. Would you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thank you. I actually went to high school in the DC area, so I've been here for a very, very long time. And in my career, I've gone in and out of government. I was involved with the faith-based initiative that President Bush launched, and then moved over to work on the issue of human trafficking at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, where we put in place a lot of the material and the themes that are to this day trying to alert people to the problem of human trafficking. I came back to work at the Department of Health and Human Services as the Assistant Secretary for the Administration of Children and Families, which is basically the human services portfolio of the Department of Health and Human Services, where a lot of the programs are housed that, like Head Start and the programs for runaway and homeless youth and kids who are victims of abuse, and that's where those are housed. So I worked in that and spent a period as the Deputy Director of the Domestic Policy Council at the White House.
Well, it's quite a remarkable years of experience and dedication, and I think it's fortunate that this organization is there with this unique mission to deal with this horrible problem of persecution. And you've been tirelessly helping SPC in conflict-ridden regions, including Syria and Iraq a few years back. And this year, SPC has turned its primary attention to Nigeria, where Christians are being killed at a higher rate than anywhere else in the world. And to give our viewers a sense of Nigeria...
I do apologize for interrupting, but let me emphasize that point. There is no country in the world in which more Christians are being martyred for their faith than Nigeria today. Nearly 4,000 were killed last year.
Yeah, it's a remarkably stark number. And for those that aren't familiar with Nigeria, Nigeria geographically is bigger than Texas. Two Californias, a little bit more than that in terms of size of land. It has a population of 240 million, which is about one-third less than the U.S. population. And in terms of its religious demographics, it's, I would say, split more or less equal, half Muslim and half Christian. I think that estimates vary, but that's pretty much where they all kind of land. And in the Christian community, it's split perhaps three ways among Catholics, Anglicans, and evangelicals. And maybe you could say a little bit more about the geography of religious faith in Nigeria, and also talk about what's happened recently in Nigeria.
Okay. The northern states of Nigeria are majority Muslim and, in fact, have instituted Sharia law. So we had the fascinating experience of talking with a Catholic bishop who is responsible for a diocese in the far northwest corner of Nigeria, where he lives under Sharia law and has done a marvelous job of developing a relationship with the leader of the Muslims in that area. it's unmistakable in Nigeria that certain members of the Islamic community, the jihadists, are pushing south relentlessly. They're trying to move and take over now next the middle belt of Nigeria and to drive Christians out of that part of the state.
Yeah, well, yes, and because Nigeria has such a large Christian population, I think it's fair to say that many people who just look at that fact think that this couldn't be a problem because half the population is Christian. But as you said, the north is Muslim, the south is Christian, and there's a middle belt, which is where a lot of the problems are happening. And just Friday, there was a massacre of 100. And that massacre happened in Benue State, which is where you were just weeks ago. But that massacre finally brought world attention to what's happening. You're seeing headlines about that, but this problem has been going on for a long time in Nigeria.
It's been going on for a very long time, and there are different actors who are pursuing this persecution of Christians. Some of our viewers may remember Boko Haram, which still exists, a Islamic militant organization that kidnapped hundreds of schoolgirls because they're opposed to the education of women. That organization is active in the northeast of the country. But what we're seeing today are bands of jihadists, young men with AK-47s and motorbikes perpetrating raids on Christian villages. As you say, in the Middle Belt, Benue State, which is known as the breadbasket of Nigeria, which is creating, apart from the human rights terror that's occurring, they're disrupting the food supply for the country of Nigeria. To emphasize your point, Nigeria is extremely important because it's already the most populous country in Africa. It's number 6 in the world, and people are predicting it could be the 3rd largest by 2050, overtaking the United States. So it's a country that matters, and as we've said, it's a country which already has the unfortunate distinction of being the place where more Christians are martyred than any other country in the world. I'm afraid it's headed toward a civil war. I think the situation there is really quite dire.
Well, the tragedy is only getting worse, and recent news confirms that. SPC did a lot of work in preparing for a trip that you took with an award-winning documentarian just weeks ago. And again, to Benue State, where some of the worst atrocities are occurring. Talk about that trip. Where you went, whom you met with, what you experienced.
So the timing was interesting in the sense that we were going on behalf of SPC because the board, as you have said, determined that Nigeria should be the focus of our work in coming years. So we wanted firsthand experience of the state of Christian persecution in Nigeria. And as you say, we took a fantastic filmmaker documentarian, Jordan Allett, with us, who documented the trip. This trip occurred shortly after a very courageous bishop from Nigeria, Bishop Anagabe, came to the United States to testify on behalf of a bill that would declare Nigeria a country of particular concern for its religious persecution record. We arrived just as Bishop Anagabe was returning to Nigeria, and then we traveled, as you said, to his diocese, which is the Diocese of Makurdi, named for a city, the capital city of Benue State, this very critical state in the economy of Nigeria. Visited with his priests and saw his diocese. And then after we departed Nigeria, the retribution against Bishop Anagabe for his testimony, for having the temerity to tell the world what's going on in Nigeria. There was an attack on his village, which murdered 50 people. And then, as you've already said, just within this past week, actually 200 people were murdered by an assault of jihadists. As I said again, young men, AK-47s, motorcycles, just decimating infants, children, women, and men. The victims in this instance, again, this is the same place, McCurdy, outside of McCurdy in Benue State. These are people who had fled earlier violence, so they were in what we know officially as IDP camps, internally displaced persons, which is just, they're refugees who haven't crossed an international border. The difference between refugees and IDPs is the question of whether they crossed into another country. IDPs, internally displaced, means they've fled their home villages to seek safety in numbers and in urban areas. And this attack was perpetrated against them, and we think that there are over 200 victims now. And you know, the witnesses are unable to describe the horror of what they've seen. People were burned, people were shot, people killed with machetes, as we saw in the Rwandan genocide.
Well, you had the opportunity to interview people who were victims, and those testimonials are harrowing, but also inspiring. I think they're extraordinary, and I'm glad, we all are glad that you were able to meet with these individuals, but each of these individuals in some sense represents thousands, each one that you spoke to.
That's right, that's right. In fact, the estimate is that there are 3 million internally displaced persons in the country today, most of whom, overwhelmingly Christian, most of whom are in Benue State. And because the government denies that there's a problem, they deny that this violence is occurring, they haven't solicited aid from the United Nations or the other international organizations that would typically respond to a humanitarian crisis of this magnitude. It's a mystery how we are keeping the people fed. The church is doing everything it can to provide sustenance to the people in these IDP camps. There's virtually no official assistance going to support these people, because to do so would require that you admit that there's actually a problem.
Well, one of the things that I remember about when you were there, number one, we were worried for you because of the safety issues. When you traveled out of Abuja, you had to bring armed security with you.
Yeah.
And those video images of that are very powerful because, of course, you have armed security, but all the people there do not.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I'm traveling in a convoy with a driver and 5 well-armed men, Jordan and I. And we made 2 trips outside of Abuja. Abuja is the capital of the country, and so a lot of our business could be conducted there. We traveled to McCurdy, as I said, and we traveled up to a city named Kaduna, another site of a lot of violence. And because there are so many kidnappings for ransom that occur on these roads, it was necessary as a foreigner to take security and to have those precautions. But like you said, what's it like to live there as an individual who, you know, travels these same roads and is just praying that they're able to get to their destination without being kidnapped? And you mentioned the testimonials we collected, particularly, you know, all the testimonials are moving. There were over 20 that we recorded, but the testimonials of the priests particularly compelling because every one of them expected to be martyred. And they all put their faith in God to deliver them safely. And happily, in these cases, the people with whom we spoke, they were, in fact, spared. And fascinating, harrowing stories of how they escaped, each case different. But, you know, Greg, this is probably the hardest thing for an American to understand, is what it's like to live in a country where there is no rule of law. In the United States, God forbid, if something happens to you, somebody breaks into your house, or worse, somebody attacks you, you have an expectation that you can get to a phone and dial 911 and help will arrive. Imagine a situation where you dial 911 and the answer you get is, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do to help you.
Yeah.
And that is the situation for Christians in Nigeria. The government is utterly failing to provide the most basic of government services protection.
Yeah.
And it defies imagination to conjure up what it's like to live in that environment.
Well, we did a lot of work in dealing with the consequences of ISIS in the Middle East. SPC visited Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. And what was so different about that, the atrocities were horrible, but what was different is that international attention was so focused on it. There was an awareness of the issue, and getting the recognition to be focused also on the fact that Christians were specifically being persecuted genocidally was something that we worked on with other groups successfully. In this case, this story in Nigeria is not even underreported, it's not reported. And that's something that's disturbing. Also the fact that the Nigerian government is neglectful, benignly or even malevolently not caring about what's happening there. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was the positive side of the faith that you saw there. And one of the things I know that you did, and we planned this very effectively for you to meet with both the congregants, but also priests and religious leaders of all three denominations, so to speak, of Christianity: Catholic, Anglican, and Evangelical.
That's right.
And talk about that and about what you saw among those different denominations and, frankly, the shared experience of persecution that they're all currently enduring.
Right. So, as you say, the two great historic Christian churches in Nigeria, the Anglican Church, which was established by the British colonialists many years ago, and the Catholic Church, both of these churches are incredibly robust. They are enjoying fantastic growth. It's not an exaggeration to say that the future of Christianity lies in Africa. Which just in my mind gives greater import to responding to the persecution that's going on in places like Nigeria. Interestingly, unlike the United States, the Protestant or Reform tradition is not found in independent churches. Those also are denominations. One of the big ones is known as the Evangelical Church Winning All. Used to be West Africa, so they changed it to Winning All. ECWA is a huge Protestant church found throughout Nigeria. So rather than small independent parishes or churches, in Nigeria, Christianity is almost all found in established denominations. Greg, I wish I could report to you that there is incredible solidarity among all of the Christians in Nigeria because they recognize the threat and they realize that it is only by standing together that they can persevere. Sadly, that is not the case. I don't see a lot of Christian solidarity. The problem is partially historic. There was a terrible civil war in Nigeria, and it became known as the Biafran Civil War, affecting the Igbo tribe, which is completely Christian in the southeast of the country. And it was brutally suppressed by the government, and unfortunately, the army at the time was disproportionately Christian. In other words, Christians would go into the armed services, less so Muslims. And so we had what was essentially a war between Christians in Nigeria, and that, of course, has created difficulties in achieving solidarity. But undoubtedly, this is where the church has to go. It has to bring together all of its various elements in Nigeria.
Well, in that solidarity, of course, we in the United States have recognized that solidarity among Christians is important for religious freedom here.
That's right.
And you know, we saw this to some extent in the Middle East, but interestingly enough, there was greater solidarity on the ground between the various churches, historic churches. The other thing I just want to point out to our viewers is that Nigeria's Christian past goes back 500 years. This is not a recently converted to Christianity area of Africa. It's not. There were missionaries that arrived 500 years ago.
Very interesting.
And so this is a place of Christianity going back. Now, of course, in the Middle East, it goes back to the apostles.
Right.
But Africa has a long tradition and a place of some of the most beautiful images and inspiring images that Jordan was able to film were of you attending church services. They're very beautiful and really an inspiring message to all of us who are maybe a bit more cynical, maybe more distant from our religious lives here in the United States. There's so much to learn positively from the experience there.
That's right there, if I may say, that their version of praise involves a lot of color, a lot of singing, a lot of music, drums. There's tremendous enthusiasm and a tremendous charismatic outpouring in their religious tradition.
Well, you went there on a mission to find what was happening there, to film it, to talk to people, develop relationships, but also to determine what can be done. And let's focus on that right now. I know that we, SPC, thanks to your good work, have identified 3 specific projects that we think can immediately improve the lives in certain parts of this area, in villages and also in IDP camps. So perhaps let's talk about those 3 projects. The first one is a water well, and talk about what led you to identify this project.
Yeah, so again, back to the area of McCurdy in Benue State, where so much of the violence is occurring and where so many of the IDPs are found. I visited IDP camps there with Father Remy, a wonderful priest of the Diocese of McCurdy, who was kind enough to show me around. And what we find is large camps, people living under tarps, and no water. So in order to access water, they have to walk for several hours a day carrying buckets to fetch the water, which is absurd to me. I mean, we've seen what a big difference fresh water makes in the quality of life in other parts of the world. To dig a well, to drill a well in IDP camps in McCurdy would overnight change the quality of life for the people who live there, including their health. We would be introducing a more reliable source of fresh water.
Now remember, when you were there, you were mentioning how this is just women with their children, often babies, because the men were all killed.
Mostly the men were killed, that's right.
And they're walking this long distance. Again, you need water all day.
That's right.
So this is a constant hours-long trek. So that's a powerful thing that can help immediately. You also visited a medical clinic that needs medical equipment. What did you see there?
So this is a fascinating bishop of the Catholic Church, who's the Bishop of Sokoto, again in the far northwest of the country, an area that's majority Muslim. And his project is to create a medical clinic that serves all people, regardless of denomination, regardless of faith. So this medical clinic would be mostly diagnostic in nature, and it's the sort of project for which SPC was created, because what we say about our work is that we want to support projects defined by the local church that have the effect of helping the church persevere in a very adverse environment. Well, I think we can agree that a medical clinic that serves everyone makes it less likely that the non-Christians are going to want to persecute the Christians when they're doing this work to increase the health of their children and their families. So the building for this particular clinic was taken care of, was provided by Hungry Helps. Hungry Helps is the Hungarian national aid organization, and I can't say too much about the good that they do.
Because there's so much.
They're a wonderful organization, and they're not afraid, unlike the United States historically, to provide support to religious organizations. Indeed, they're eager to do so, but Hungary is a small country, and so their resources are limited. So they provided the building, and now they need help getting the actual diagnostic equipment. So that is something that we're working on responding to right now, to get Bishop Kuka, the Catholic bishop of this place, the equipment he needs to open his clinic.
And I should note that we saw this also in Iraq, where there were IDP camps north of Erbil of Christians that had been driven out of the Nineveh Plain and Mosul and the areas of northwest Iraq by ISIS, and the medical clinics that they had established were open to everyone.
Yes.
There was no discrimination, and that's a beautiful thing, and also practically very wise, because people around them who are not Christian can also benefit and recognize, and again, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing that they're doing this, and I'm glad that we're identifying that to help. Now, the third specific project, of course, reminds us of what we just talked about, where you had to have armed security. They don't have that there in these villages that are subject to attack. Talk about that project and how that will benefit people that are in these villages.
You know, Greg, you and I are sitting today in Washington, right, which has been very involved in the fight against insurgency movements around the world. There's a history here of how you protect villages. And I think that it would be a tremendous gift to Nigeria if we could collect the experience and wisdom of this place and share it with our friends in Nigeria about how it's possible to provide early warning. If people could get out of their houses before these motorcycle riding jihadists show up and start killing, if they can just make it to the brush and get out of the village and hide, or provide defenses, that perhaps fences or some sort of defense like that, this would be a huge contribution to the villages that haven't yet been raided.
Right, and this includes potentially communications equipment and other things that will immediately result in more lives being saved. So
That's
this
right.
is critical.
That's right. You know, just two examples. We went through this in Peru, where we helped defend villages from the Marxist insurgency there. We went through this in the Philippines also to protect villagers from the Marxist insurgents in Mindanao. So I think there's a lot of expertise that could be brought to bear.
Yes, and we're already identifying who can help us with that. Now let's take a broader view. Obviously, what's happening in Nigeria is important for the U.S. and the world to deal with and really see what is happening and to take action. We have identified 3 broader projects that will help dealing with the whole broader concern about focus on the issue. Perhaps maybe first talk about the U.S. government and what we could be doing to help get them to act.
I think this is terribly important. I think we need to call on the U.S. government to influence the behavior of the Nigerian government to actually start protecting its people, to step up to their responsibilities and put an end to this violence. There's no question that there is complicity with the violence that's going on the part of the government of Nigeria. It has the capability to step in and put a stop to much of the violence. and it's not doing so. So we call on the U.S. government to do everything it can to influence the behavior of the Nigerian government. Now, we're not talking about deploying American military assets to Nigeria. That would not be appropriate. But Nigeria is, as you mentioned, it's a country with huge oil exports. It's a participant in the world economy. And I believe there's pressure that can be brought to bear. We saw President Trump in an Oval Office meeting with the President of South Africa, where he pursued a very similar theme of you need to take care of your people, and did not allow the President to sweep that, the President of South Africa, to sweep that problem under the rug. We need the same kind of truth-telling to Nigeria. And the President has appointed a special envoy for Africa. We're working right now to get a meeting with the special envoy and other key people, including the Secretary of State, to press the point that the U.S. government can do things short of military intervention to influence the behavior of Nigeria and start protecting its people.
Well, and as you know, the White House has created a Religious Freedom Commission, and I think this should be one of the things that they're focused on. Then there's the issue of the church and how the church globally can pay attention to this and focus on this.
Well, first of all, we have the situation of the Catholic Church and the moral authority that resides in the Pope. We have a new Pope in the Catholic Church, of course. And interestingly, in his Sunday address, his prayer, he prayed for the victims of the violence in Benue State in Nigeria. Yes. So the Holy Father, Pope Leo, is aware of the situation, but I think we need to encourage the Catholic Church to remain focused on Christian persecution in Nigeria and to continue to shine a light on the situation there. And to call, there are over nearly 60 Catholic dioceses throughout Nigeria. I mean, there are a lot of, it's a large structure. Yes. Yeah. And the Holy Father needs to cause the international church to be focused on what's happening on to the church in Nigeria. I think similarly things can be done among the Anglican community and the Protestant Reform communities.
Yeah, and you also mentioned as a third broader project the issue which you just intimated of solidarity and encouraging solidarity in Nigeria among the churches.
That's right. I think there are specific things that can be done to encourage dialogue between the Christian faiths in Nigeria and to, through this conversation and friendship, to develop a stronger sense of solidarity and the sense that we're in this together.
Well, you know, one of the broader issues that I often hear when I talk to friends and others about what we're doing at SPC is many people will say, well, we have a lot of problems here at home. We have our own problems of religious freedom and liberty here in the United States. So as Christians, we have to focus on that. This is very far away. Why should we care about what's happening in Nigeria?
Right.
So what's your answer to that?
Right. We recently celebrated Pentecost Sunday in the Catholic Church, and one of the readings there was from 1 Corinthians, and it talked about this mysterious concept in the Christian faith of the mystical body of Christ. And through baptism and through communion, we are made parts of one body. And everyone who's a member of that body of Christ is of concern to the head of the body, who is Jesus Christ himself. We serve Christ by serving our brothers and sisters in Nigeria. And you know, it's a matter of the level of adversity and hardship. It's very hard for Americans to understand what life is like for our Christian brothers and sisters in Nigeria, at least those who are in the zone of persecution, the geographic area where so much of this violence is occurring. But we are called to do that. We are called to have a relationship with Christian brothers and sisters in places like Nigeria where they're suffering. A part of the body is suffering, and it is our job to respond and do what we can to ameliorate that suffering.
Well, let's turn it now to what our viewers could perhaps help us do. What are we asking our viewers for now?
I think, Greg, that we have launched a petition effort, and the point of the petition is to express to the Trump administration and to the leaders, particularly in the Department of State, that we are concerned about the situation in Nigeria, and we want to see action taken to influence the behavior of the government of Nigeria in ways that we've discussed. So the number one thing that our viewers can do is to join us in the petition effort and let your voices be heard by that act, by signing the petition. Of course, we have specific projects that require financial assistance. We would ask for contributions to support the activities that you and I have been discussing, specifically in Nigeria. And, you know, a friend of ours who's been working in the arena of Christian persecution for a long time, Nina Shea, who's at the Hudson Institute, a hero in this cause,
Yes,
said,
powerful advocate.
you know, she has said that one of the most important things that can be done is to let the people of Nigeria know that the people of the United States are aware of what's happening and care about what's happening. And that is a benefit of all the other things I've described, by signing the petition, by making contributions that allow this direct assistance to our friends and partners in Nigeria. It sends the signal that we are aware.
Yes, so I'll summarize what you just said. There are two ways that you can help. The first is to sign the petition, and if you go to our website, it's solidaritypersecutedchurch.org, one word, solidaritypersecutedchurch.org. And please do read the petition, and if you like what you see, please sign it. The more we have, the better, to send a message to the U.S. government. The second thing is donate as much as you feel you are able to help us raise the funds necessary to make the 3 local projects that we described possible: freshwater access, medical equipment, and security. And I think with that, we will have an impact, and over time we'll help address this problem. So that concludes another episode of SPC Conversations. And thank you for joining us, Steve. We really are grateful that you took this trip. We were worried and concerned for your safety.
I know you were.
Safe and sound. And
thank you for your partnership, Greg. It's been a great effort over these 10 years.
And what we didn't realize when you went on this mission was the extent to which the problem is far worse than we realized. And that, I think, is probably, if to sum up the message of what you found out there, is that it's worse
That's
than
true.
we knew. And I'd like to thank you again, to our viewers, our supporters, all those who have joined us that are learning about us now. We really appreciate your support and your viewership. So thank you very much.